This is the Atlantic coast sea breeze that we were talking about. You can actually trace it on Doppler radar and with this cell that you see south of downtown Augusta. There it is, right over Beach Island, and you see this faint green line? That's the sea breeze crossing exit 5 right into our camera. So warm air typically just rises, and that's what scours out the smoke 9 out of 10 times. But what's happening today, what's happening tomorrow and Friday is the air above the surface is actually warmer than the air at the ground level. So as a result, the air doesn't rise, and whatever's at the surface, it stays there. So that warm air aloft is actually trapping a lot of this smoke at the surface, and we call that a temperature inversion. As a Gulf low hugs the coastline, moves along the Atlantic coast, and it's going to have Arctic air on the backside of it. That setup is textbook for what you would see for a CSRA winter weather event. And fortunately, looks like we're going to be avoiding freezing rain, sleet, any type of ice accumulations. But what we are watching for is snow. And in some cases, it could be a decent amount of it. Believe it or not, it's actually stronger than Umberto, which is still a weak Category 1 at 80 miles an hour sustained winds, both of which are rotating around that common center. This is what we've been talking about with the Fujiwara effect. It takes two sometimes, and that's what's happening with Imelda as it's getting pushed offshore, and it's going to stay that way. So again, Imelda, no impacts on the CSRA. We are looking good to go for the remainder of this week. We have so much moisture in the atmosphere this time of year. Usually we don't have a front that is right nearby to really trigger it. In this case, we do. That sea breeze could collide with some outflow boundaries from storms to our west and produce a few heavier downpours later this evening. I'm watching areas along I-20 and north of I-20 for that over the next hour to 2 hours. But most of us are going to stay warm, muggy, and dry. What happens is winds converge from the dry side of the dry line to the warm and moist side of the dry line. Where that convergence happens, you get spin and you also get the lift for thunderstorms. This is why severe weather in Tornado Alley, if you will, happens a lot in parts of Texas and in Oklahoma. So that dry line is a big feature out in the Great Plains. The worst of the rain right now in places like Fury's Ferry Road, Washington Road, right here in the Evans and Martinez area at Fox City 4. Downtown Augusta getting a little bit of a breather, some lighter rain. Riverwatch Parkway also getting torrential rain at this point, and Bobby Jones on the northern half. So just make sure to be careful on the roads. Try to stay off of them if you can. We are not guaranteeing snow. In fact, far from it, because this low hasn't formed, and until it does, we're not going to have a great idea of its track. We explain the science behind the song. Air you can wear.
Welcome back, everyone. As you know, many songs are inspired by the weather, but are those lyrics factual? That is one question. Or is it just a creative use of words from very talented musicians and composers, right? Meteorologist Alex Carter, who loves music like many of us, but he takes it to a different level, taking a closer look at with another edition. I love this segment that you came up with, Weather Music Myths. It's a lot of fun, and the other cool thing is we learn something if we pay attention.
Yeah, we always try to teach in this segment, and sometimes it's by the mistakes of very famous musical artists
and very successful, right?
And very successful ones at that. Right. Actually, Huey Lewis, we talked about this last week. He got it wrong, unfortunately. Right. Stevie Nicks and Christine McVie and Mr. Fleetwood himself. We'll see if they can get it right.
Okay.
So this song, you know this one, Trent.
Are we talking about Dreams?
We're talking about Dreams. Let's go ahead and give it a listen.
So I've heard this song, I mean, literally, it seems like thousands of times, right?
Yeah.
So thunder only happens when it's raining. That can't be accurate.
It's not. I hate to say it, Stevie. And she's still touring at times. Does a wonderful job. She came to Huntsville just the other day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Parents really enjoyed the show. But with this song, Thunder Only Happens When It's Raining, obviously Stevie lives out east. Because out west, there's a phenomenon, and we don't know anything about this, Trent.
Right.
It's called a dry thunderstorm.
Okay.
Thunder actually happens when it's not raining.
How about that?
So it's all about this phenomenon called virga, and you might have heard of virga. It's all about how dry the air is at the surface. So with this particular situation, let's dive into a thunderstorm that you would typically see in Georgia and South Carolina. There's moisture from top to bottom. We call it lots of the dew points, the air you can wear. That's why rain always falls from the clouds and actually makes it to the ground. That's because the air is not dry at all in the summertime. Now let's take it to maybe what you would see in Colorado and Utah, out in the Great Plains even at times. This is a phenomenon called virga, and it's when there's a layer of dry air between the cloud itself and the ground. And as rain begins to fall, it runs into that dry air and it evaporates before you ever see it reaching the ground. That's why if you go out west and you see a rain shower miles in the distance, you might not see that column of rain making it all the way down because it's evaporating as it's going through that layer of dry air. Pretty cool what we can see in real time with some of these thunderstorms. And even a couple of you at home have sent me versions of virga, which is a very rare phenomenon. That's all on this Easter morning from Drive,
Chip, and Putt.
For Brian and Kingston, I'm meteorologist Alex Carter, Fox 54, working for you. And finally, you found your way to the green, but sometimes, especially depending on the weather conditions, that can be the hardest part. Let's talk about faster green speeds. We're expecting those at Champions Retreat this week, all thanks to the warm and dry pattern that we've been in. When the greens are dry, they're not holding on to a lot of moisture. That allows the ball to roll a little bit faster, and for aggressive putters, that can find themselves in a costly position because it's harder to find their way back to the hole. But now let's fast forward to a couple days of good soaking rain. If we could get that here at Champions Retreat, which is not likely this week, that's what can slow the greens down, all thanks to the ground moisture creating some resistance on the ball. And that means slower greens and less margin of error for aggressive putters, and it's easier for them to find their way back to the hole. As you just saw there, Cameron Smith is staying weather aware, just like the rest of the field at the 90th Masters Tournament. So many different holes at Augusta National Golf Club, they can be hazardous, all thanks to firm greens, which we are expecting this week because of a warm and dry forecast. Golfers are already making adjustments, not just for putting, but for approach shots. No one knows that better than the 2023 Masters champion who braved all kinds of weather on his way to a green jacket.
Well, it all depends on the wind, the pin location, and how firm the greens are.
Many golfers will be delighted to know that the winds will let up as we head into the weekend. However, we know good and well, Augusta National, known for its treacherous pin placements, and you combine that with the fast greens, many patrons think that the scores will be much higher for the 2026 Masters Tournament.
Compared to the last 5 years, you'll probably see, the highest winning score we've seen in a while. I would think single digits under par. It would be hard to believe they get to double digits.
So now you've heard it from both the pros and the patrons here at the Masters Tournament. Now it's time for the golf to be played. From the Augusta National Golf Club, I'm meteorologist Alex Carter, Fox 54, working for you. Cloudy skies moving in for the second half of your Friday. All signs of big changes arriving by tomorrow. Today didn't feel half bad. Some mid-50s out there for high temperatures, and we're going to be rapidly cooling down in the overnight and especially through the day Saturday as that Arctic blast moves in with a winter storm warning in effect for the entire CSRA. Upper 40s to low 50s out there right now, and look at Bamberg, still at 55 this evening. Temperatures going to be falling through the 40s for much of your evening plans. Wind chill values in the 30s, and then again, the rapid drop in temperatures, that's going to take shape starting tomorrow morning. Winter storm warning now in place for the entire CSRA. When it comes to the overall general setup for this winter storm, it's one of the more impressive ones we've seen in recent memory. Again, if you were going to see snow in the CSRA, this is a textbook setup for it. So tomorrow, expecting totals generally in that 2 to 4 inch range for much of the region. Now, if you're in Emmanuel, southern Jenkins County, we're going to show you how that might not apply to you entirely in just a moment. But the further north of I-20 that you go, and the further into the South Carolina side of the river that you go, the higher the chance of an impactful snowfall. Places that could win out on the snow Wagner, Sally, Johnston, Trenton, Mount Carmel, and northern McCormick County. Those could be our hot spots. And again, single-digit wind chills Sunday morning will lead to impacts to pipes. And on top of that, we're going to have some slick roadways. So make sure to drive carefully if you absolutely have to be out there. Most of us probably just need to stay home and ride this out a little bit. The potential snowfall accumulations. Again, the further north and east you go into the CSRA, the higher the accumulations. If you're in southern Jefferson, Emmanuel, Jenkins County, you might see up to an inch. 1 to 2 inches going to be possible in our southern counties such as Burke, Screven, Allendale, Jenkins, Jefferson counties. The Augusta Metro, I'm looking at about 2 to 4 inches in these areas, and then the further north of I-20 and the further east into South Carolina you go, the higher likelihood of seeing totals that could reach up to 4 to even 5 inches. And you see that backed by our in-house model. Look at some of those higher range totals closer to areas north of I-20 and towards Aiken, Barnwell counties, and in our HRRR model. And you see some of those extravagant totals there near Johnston, up near Minetta, Ridge Spring, Ward, Wagner, and Sally, up to 5, maybe even 6 inches in a couple of those spots, especially in the drifts, because it is going to be windy. Now I want to show you the road impacts by the time frame that we're looking at. So this is going to be Saturday morning. Snow starts to accumulate. Roads are going to start to get slick by the late morning, headed into the lunch hour in a few places. Roads will really go downhill Saturday afternoon and evening as the heaviest snowfall begins to blanket the area. The worst time frame for travel is going to start Saturday afternoon, running all the way through Sunday morning. Even when the snow is finished, it's going to freeze over early Sunday with those Arctic temperatures, and that's going to be hazardous for travel and hazardous to be outside with wind chills from 0 to 5 degrees. And then Sunday afternoon, here comes the melting with upper 30s and sunshine, but it's not going to melt all of it away. And then we get to Monday morning and we'll have some areas of black ice lingering. Let's show you Futurecast, and this is later this evening, nothing much happening. Don't see a whole lot of rain coming in out ahead of the main event. And this is around sunrise Saturday. Snow showers beginning to filter in. The Augusta Metro, I think accumulations will start closer to 9 to 10 a.m. and then it overspreads the region into the afternoon and evening tomorrow. Some of these will be bands of heavier snow, so even 5 miles down the road could be drastically different totals than one other area. And all that snow becomes to an end by midnight, and here comes the bitter cold wind chills. Sunday morning, 0 to 5 degrees in some spots possible. Monday morning, 10 to 15 degrees, and you'll see drastic improvements in the 7-day forecast once you get past the weekend. Black ice Monday morning, quickly melting on Monday afternoon, and 50s return later next week with rain chances moving in Wednesday afternoon and evening and early Thursday morning.